guys, my name is Rawtex and welcome to the first video in a series I'm going to be doing on shader graph in Unity. I'm going to start off with showing you why I think shader graph is so good, why you should learn it, what I've been doing with it. So you can do lots of cool stuff. I mean, a traditional workflow would be to paint stuff manually, right? Like I've done for these little boxes. I've painted on these bits of rust in Quicksilver Mixer. People do the same thing more commonly in Substance Painter, same as I've done for this. But these materials aren't reusable, right? If I have a look at what this albedo looks like, it's a material that I can really only ever use once on that object, and it's fine for single objects. And you know, I will continue to paint things one by one for some stuff, like this bin as well. But there's also use cases where you want to have a material that you can reuse on all kinds of stuff, okay? And that's the kind of thing that you can do with shader graph quite well. And you can make materials that have a lot of breakup, so you don't get so much repetition by having things like decals. I've got this kind of leakage on this little box here. I've got these kind of rounded corners. I've got this kind of dark stuff on here which makes it look like wax on the ledge. I put puddles on my materials, which has a nice bit of breakup. I put decals on the materials as well, like these concrete slabs here. Even this curb is a decal on this single object, this one material. Curbs are a decal, these slabs are a decal, and then we've got these kind of underlying slabs, which is the base texture. And I put these decals on, and then I do kind of puddles over the top of the decals. And as soon as you see that, you realise why it's better than using decal projectors, right? Because if you put a decal on something, that's always going to be sitting over the top. If you do it in a shader, you can kind of build it up in layers, right? It's kind of you can do whatever you want, but what I'm doing here is I'm doing my base texture, and then I'm doing decals, and then I'm doing puddles over the top of both, and then I'm also doing kind of world space darkness and lightness variation, which you can see. You can't really see it so well on this one, but if I was to take it off, you would definitely notice that it's not there. But if you have a look at this one where we've got these bricks, you can really see these lighter patches, and that's all done by using a height map and world space procedural noise. So when I make these shaders, I give myself loads of different sliders. I'll just show you what some of these kind of sliders do before we get into actually making a shader. I'm starting off with the basics. So I've got this one shader here which lets me select base texture, and base roughness, and base normals and stuff. I also pass in a height map which I use to blend puddles and lightness and darkness patches. So if I scroll down here, I've given myself a layer 2 and a layer 3. If I just put these both to 0, you'll see that they're gone. Now if I put the strength of layer 2 right up, it makes it a lot more pronounced what it's doing. I'm also using a world space noise to do that, so if I make the noise scale smaller, it's going to be like bigger patches. If I make it higher, it's going to be lots of small patches, right? And I use that to add darkness, and I'm also doing it to add lightness as well. So if I bring this one in and then change the noise, you can see this one is kind of doing the same thing, but it's also more blurred, right? It's not so hard edged and blended with a height map, but it does a similar thing. Let me just take this back, Control Z a few times to how it was originally. And then also, if I was to move this in the world, you'll see that these kind of lightness and darkness patches stay put, but they kind of move a little bit because it's being blended with the height map, which is moving, but it kind of roughly stays put. Now if I go and find a puddle on my road which uses the exact same shader, see I've got a puddle here, so now if I move this over to where that puddle is, you'll see the puddle appears on this bit of pavement, and again the puddle's being blended with a height map, so it kind of adds a bit of realism by it interacting with the base material. So a good example, a better example for that would be to look at this here. So if I move this over to where we've got some puddles, we can see the puddles are being blended in with the height map of this base texture, and also being blended in with the height map of the decals. So the decals are these slabs here and these slabs here, and you can see the puddles kind of going just on the edge of these slabs and just in the corner there. And it's really quite powerful what we can do with it, and it's a lot of fun as well, making all these little sliders that you can play with. Just put that back there. So that's one use case, doing darkness, lightness, puddles. We can learn how to do that eventually. We're going to start with the basics first though. We've got this box here, and I'll show you what the kind of the layers that I build up with this shader do. So just let this here. So I have a base texture first, which is just this concrete that you can see, and I give it a tint so I can change the colour. Right, I can make it whatever colour I want. Sometimes you might want a bit of a bluer edge. This one I'm kind of going for quite a kind of pinky look. I've given it a saturation slider, so if I bring that up and down, it will affect the saturation of the albedo texture that's being blended in. I've got a contrast which basically ups the contrast and lowers the contrast of the albedo. I've also given it a normal strength slider, so the normal map of that base layer, you can see it kind of coming in and out here. And I'm also giving it a tiling. So this base texture I'm doing triplanar, which means if I was to move this object, that base texture just stays in place wherever it is in the world, which is really good for when you start putting these objects up against each other, when you start repeating the textures over and over again. So with a triplane texture you can add a tiling as well, so you can see this, I can bring the tiling up and it makes the texture effectively smaller on the face of the object, or I can bring it right down and it makes it really, really big. Okay, just going to take this back to where it was before. So that's what the base layers do. We've got the contrast, all the stuff that interacts with this base texture, and then I start building stuff up on top of it. Okay, so I give myself a slider that affects the shininess, which it doesn't really seem to be doing a lot here, but I've also blended in 2 extra normal maps, which gives it these kind of nice rounded edges. Now if I was to take this off entirely, you see now it's actually just a very hard edged box. So I have 2 normal maps that I blend in, and I position these with precise UVing. If I bring up the first layer, you see this gives it a kind of a rounded corner, and the second normal map that I'm blending in gives it this kind of jagged concrete, which I actually got that from this texture here. I took this texture as normal, cut it up in Photoshop, made a kind of trim sheet out of it, and then I can use it on any object. So I blend in this kind of jagged edge with the rounded edge, and it kind of gives it this nice kind of realistic looking look. And then I blend in decals, right? So I've got this kind of darkness patches at the top. This is a leakage decal atlas I'm using, which looks like this. I've just got these different leakages on a transparent atlas that I then just position over the object with UVing on a particular UV channel. So if I go back to this material again, see I've got a decal strength slider here, so if I take the decals off you can see they're completely gone. Then I can bring the decals in, I can affect the strength of them. I even have some controls here that lets these decals reduce the shininess where the decals are being placed, which is a nice little effect. And then after the decals, then I'm doing this another decal layer which uses a completely different atlas, which is this kind of ledge transparent PNG atlas, and I blend that in and I'm interacting with the height map and I'm kind of making things a bit shinier and stuff. And this material I've used in loads of places, so I'm using it here for these railings, I'm using it for these boxes, and it's all just one material that I'm using all over the place in different shapes and sizes, but it means that I've got one draw call, right, for this object, for this object, for this object. It's all one draw call because it's all one material, right? Even for these ones here. This is actually a good bit of demo of what the wax looks like, because this interacts with the height map as well and makes it just shiny just on the tips of the little peaks in the concrete texture, using the height map to do that. Yeah, so that's cool. I've got another example of using the same shader over here. I've got this concrete texture, so I'll break down this texture as well. So here again, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and take everything off. So I'm gonna put my decal strength to 0. Gonna put my dirt blend strength to 0. Gonna put my normal maps down. Gonna put my highlight and darken maps down. and then now we've just got this kind of quite plain concrete texture. And what I do is I just build things up over that. So if I go back and Control Z a few bits, you see now we're beginning to get these little edges here. Actually, if I Control Y forward through these, see I've got this. It's a good example for it. Got this very hard edged box here. Now, as I start turning things back on again by Control Zing, you'll see I start getting these little white lines appearing on the edges. Kind of get this jagged concrete normal map appearing on the edges. Now I get my rounded normal map appearing on the edges. Now I've got this kind of dirt texture here that's been applied in world space position. And now I've got these kind of decals which is having this kind of leakage effect. So yeah, that pretty much sums up what I've been doing with Shady Graph, what you can do with it. It's quite powerful. There's probably loads more stuff that I could do with it. Another thing I'm doing is these cool kind of fake interiors. Again, all powered by Shady Graph. If you guys want to see a tutorial on that, maybe I could do that further down the line. One more cool thing I'll show you before actually starting working on a basic shader is the power of height blending. It's so cool. So for this road texture, this is built up in layers again. I've got, this is just one flat object, one flat plane or whatever that's got geometry, right? That's placing these lines, these all these decals and stuff is being placed with basic cuts in the model, and this face here I'm positioned over a decal atlas. So if I show you the decal atlas for this, it looks like this. So I've got a decal atlas just for this road. So I've got the white lines, the yellow lines, the taxi right in. I've got these crosswalk kind of decals here. I've got this kind of arrow. I've got these dotted, like marked lines. Like what we see here. And we've got this kind of black stuff that sits at the edge, and then I position that over the top of the base asphalt just with UV positioning and blended together in the shader. And then I'm also doing a lot of darkness and lightness patches on this road as well. Kind of hard to see, but again, if I was to turn it off, you would notice it. So let me just break down this material as well quickly. So I've got my base asphalt set up. I've got my normal map and controls and tiling controls for the base asphalt, and I've also given it this height map, which I've taken as basically a displacement map from Quixel Mixer, but then I've taken it into Photoshop, inverted it, made it more contrasty, and we'll go over that stuff later on. But then I've also got this layer here which adds darkness. So it's kind of a lot more pronounced there, but that's what it looks like normally. It's actually making it a bit lighter. I've got another layer here which is doing large dark patches, which again it's way too pronounced there, but when you bring it back and kind of blend it in, it just adds a nice bit of breakup to the default textures. I'm actually using another mask here to add these kind of driven in parts, which makes it a bit lighter and a bit shinier. And I've got these decals which I'm blending in by using a height map, right? So I've taken the base asphalt and then I place these decals over it, but I use a mask to do that. But that mask I also blend with the height map of the asphalt, which lets me make these sliders that, let me see if I can find that slider quickly. So I've got decal height min, decal height max, decal height contrast, decal normal strength. So the decals has as a normal map, so I've got a slider that makes that stronger, but I've got this height contrast as well, which lets me basically have control over how the height map interacts with the mask. So you see this kind of blends in and out. So it's a really nice effect. And then let me just Control Y that, and then that all sits just underneath, and then the puddles go over the top. So that's something that you could not do with decal projector, because you wouldn't get this water texture and the shine on the decals. So yeah, that's a little demo of what I've been doing with the shaders. The next video I'm going to be starting looking at making a very simple shader, right? We're going to start simple and work our way up.